Junkie, and today we're back on the Sandbox project. Today we're going to be going over something that I didn't necessarily come up with all by myself, but is something I got on the marketplace, I believe, and rather ported it over. So I'll be showing you how that works, because the original project to do the lighting involved using objects. Now obviously objects in a large world with been over is inefficient and causes lag, so in ours we use backgrounds instead, which is much more efficient and a lot easier to draw on the screen at once. Now the problem with this, I can't actually show you the lighting at the moment, but you have to take my word for it that it does work. We'll possibly turn off the frustum culling and show you, but what it does is it takes a background, determines whether that is a block or not, and if it is a block it treats it as if it was an object previously. So we're gonna go for this one. I think this is the project without frustum culling. The problem with putting frustum culling and lighting in together is that the lighting uses a set layer over the top, and by adding the frustum culling in, that layer just keeps getting refreshed and it never really gets drawn properly. So yeah, if we give this one a run, this might work, and I should be able to show you guys the lighting system, and I will just go over and explain it in depth. So yeah, it is possible to work with frustum culling and lighting, but for this specific example it wasn't like that. I wasn't that bothered about it. So you can see here there's two things going on. The first one is the lighting around the blocks, which I think is quite nice. So you can only really see this first level, and the rest gets kind of dark as you go down. The second thing, of course, is the day and night cycle. Now, as you can see, the day and night cycle is very, very fast. It alternates very quickly, but this just determines how dark the whole room is. So you can obviously spread that out and make it a full day and night cycle. So anyway, all this is controlled using these objects, and they're almost directly ported in. In fact, you can probably see their block lighting for game. This is the original. So if you search that up, you could get the original. Of course, the original does not have all the right stuff. So you can see here it uses import. It uses we don't want to here. It uses objects and shaders and scripts, which is what we use effectively. We've got the shaders. The shaders are not changed, I don't believe. Nope, they are exactly the same as they come. The only bits that have changed are the scripts, so you could probably just import these over. That's probably the quickest way of doing it, the shaders. The scripts, have they changed at all? Let's check them. So the initialize will definitely stay the same. That's pretty self-explanatory. The create, yep, that is exactly the same. Destroy, yep, that's a very simple one. Draw, now I believe draw is set a little bit differently, but we'll go into that a little bit later, because I think these bottom three are changed. We'll go over the objects first though. So first of all we have the BL object, which is effectively just the object which holds the screen, so the layer over the top, which determines the lighting, as you would. So all there is in this is the surfaces. It just holds the base, the blurred, and the temporary, and all it has is a destroy event. So in the event that this gets destroyed, which is controlled by the other objects, then these surfaces get removed effectively. And that's pretty simple. This is all, it's worth noting, all pretty much identical. I'll tell you which bits are different, so you can port it over and you can work into your own game, and I probably will put on a copy of these files, because it does start to get a little bit more complicated. So anyway, in the actual object example, this is where the big code happens. So the create event is exactly the same. It yeah, again it says there, because this is not my thing originally, this is just ported over, so it does have all these handy comments. Now, this is something that I decided to add in, so the block width and block height. Actually, did I? I'm not sure. But all it does is it sets these variables, which the creator has decided, equal to our variables, so we can just use it for continuation. this just draws a rectangle. It's type 4, whatever, doesn't really matter. In my opinion, this is what worked, and all you're doing is using these preset variables here. What this does is okay, so this is the one whether it's not a block or is a block, and yeah, these are literally identical. The redo and the redo XY and stuff, they're for making sure it always draws correctly. So if we go into the step event, this is where most of the magic happens. If redo is true, so if we are wanting to refresh, then we take our tx and ty, which are here, and it updates the rectangle. And that's pretty simple. It literally just says that if in certain events, then it sets this equal and updates it. So this is kind of regular as well. So if we change something almost. This, all it does is it loops through the width and the height, and it updates the rectangle. Again, nothing that intense there. This is a little bit more complicated, but again, it is effectively just copied over. There's nothing in here which is that different. The only thing which is slightly different is this, I believe. I think this was how it originally was, and this is what I've changed it to be, because of course we have to oops, that is one. We have to use our grid instead of using whether there's an object there and whatnot. So I think this is all kind of similar to the actual code that was in there. If we go into the scripts now, the draw script, again, this is just using the variables we set out earlier. This is all exactly the same, apart from here. I think this was probably debugging, but what I've added in is if it is solid, to draw a point at that point to indicate that it is solid. Now I believe we will go back to this later. Again, this is all identical. There's nothing that complicated in any of this. Well, it is complicated, but it's all pre-coded, so none of it is changed by the implementation. This is just the types. We use type 4, I believe. I cannot remember. Or 5, I'm not sure. But it was the one that, in my opinion, worked the best. So, again, yeah, I think that is all the same. Yeah, I think this is where the DS grid come into it. So the blocks are laid out over the rectangle, so each cell of the grid should be true if it's supposed to be to add to the shading, false otherwise. So I'm not exactly, we'll have to check quickly which we pass into that. We might just pass our normal, I think we pass our normal grid in, which obviously isn't amazing because it does hold all of the IDs and stuff for the blocks, but for the most part it'll either be, it'll be false if there isn't anything there. So that's the only scenario that we really need to know, because then we know every other block is true. In the update, again, this I think was just debugging almost, so just checking whether it's solid and drawing that point. I don't think this runs, but I'm not sure. It doesn't appear, so again I think that's kind of the same, and yep, this is also identical. So effectively there isn't a massive change from one to another that I've noticed throughout, but it's more the fact that if you import this straight over, then it is not going to work. There is some bits which just need changing. For example, there's these big example scripts which we do not have. We've only kept them. We've got all of the block lighting scripts, shaders even, but the objects, for example, I think the object example I've stripped down quite a bit, and the BL rectangle I stripped down a lot as well, so it's kind of more simple than it originally was, and it works of course with backgrounds instead of using objects, which of course makes it a lot more efficient and makes it work in our game. So anyway, that was my video on how lighting works in my game. If you liked this video, remember to like, subscribe, always do as I want to do, and I will talk to you in the next one.